This was a story that popped into the news a few weeks ago that I completely missed. Workers at Microsoft-owned ZeniMax Media voted yes to unionize 300 QA staff positions. Roughly 300 QA workers are included in the union. Now that is an awesome development. This has been unions in the game industry are starting to pop off, and I am 1,000% for it. I wasn't anticipating that Microsoft's union effort would succeed, but here we go. A supermajority of workers at Microsoft ZeniMax Media voted to join the ZeniMax Workers United Union, Communications Worker of America announced Tuesday. Roughly 300 quality assurance workers have been voting in elections since early December, either through union authorization cards or an online portal. Microsoft, per its labor neutrality deal with CWA, recognized the union. That's good. That's a good development. You know, all of these, I will say that it seems like all of these unionizations that are going on in the game industry seems to revolve almost exclusively around QA, which is interesting. You know, as a QA person myself, that's what I did for all those years in the game industry. It's fascinating that this is like this. It's literally, when you talk about movements from the ground up, you don't get much more on the ground in the game industry than the QA departments. But I wonder if this is going to have any kind of impact or grow into the engineering departments or the art departments or anything like that. Seems like the artists, honestly, like, yes, QA, but it also seems like the artists should have been first on the ball with unionization efforts, because especially with the advent of AI art and the kind of shit that people are popping off in like Midjourney, seems like art might be you know, out the window here, you know, in the next 5 to 10 years or so, or at least concept artists. I know several people who do concept art in the game industry that are like, you know, they're worried about their livelihood because of what Midjourney can provide and stuff like Midjourney. It's kind of sad. I could definitely see the game industry being the first to jump on using those AI tools in order to really crank out like obscene amounts of really high quality concept art. I was talking to one of my coworkers about all of these new AI properties. There's one, I wish I can remember the name of it, but basically it's AI generated code. And a lot of the engineers have been experimenting with it. And my coworker had a great quote. He said, because he was talking specifically about people who are afraid of AI taking their jobs. He said, you shouldn't be afraid of AI taking your jobs. You should be afraid of you should be afraid of your job being taken by the person who is using AI to do your job. So it's like, yeah, okay, that makes sense. Like treating AI as an additional tool, the way that Photoshop is a tool, right? In that capacity, I can understand it. And maybe, you know, all hope isn't totally lost for artists in that capacity. But I feel like, you know, if they ever wanted to implement some kind of mechanism with which they can collectively protect themselves from the advent of AI generated art replacing them, you know, unionization seems to be the first step in that effort. The core of ZeniMax Workers United is solidarity, ZeniMax Associate QA Tester Eliza Ellison told Polygon. Where we are different in projects, location, and experiences, we make up for it tenfold through our passion, drive, and hunger for changing our reality. The ZeniMax union vote ended on December 31st, CWA said in a news release, with ZeniMax QA workers organizing for months ahead of the original announcement. For Microsoft to recognize the union, half plus one of the 300 ZeniMax QA workers had to vote in favor. That's a lot. Hold on one second. $300 QA workers is a ton. I don't know how many. I don't know how many QA total were at EA when I was there. I would imagine much more than 300, but they were all spread out across different studios. So I don't know. I don't know what. I mean, we never had any communication with any other studio's QA. So I wonder how communication occurred. I wonder what. I'm really curious about how this was all organized behind the scenes. What the logistics were between all of these studios, different QA departments, organizing such a mass movement. The ZeniMax union vote ended December 31st. CBSA said in a news release, with ZeniMax QA organizing for months ahead of the original. Oh, I think I may have read this one. Yeah, 300. A supermajority means a larger group voted yes. The vote happened outside of the National Labor Relations Board purview because of Microsoft's neutrality agreement signed in June. Union elections are typically held through the NLRB. Interesting. Workers will soon begin contract negotiations with Microsoft. Quote, in light of the results of the recent unionization vote, we recognize the Communication Workers of America as the bargaining representative for the quality assurance employees at ZeniMax, a Microsoft spokesperson said in a statement. We look forward to engaging in good faith negotiations as we work towards a collective bargaining agreement. Awesome. That's awesome. ZeniMax Media is a subsidiary of Microsoft that was acquired in a $7.5 billion deal in 2020. It also it includes studios like Bethesda, id Software, and ZeniMax Online, makers of games like Starfield. I've been watching a lot of videos about Starfield lately. I don't know. I don't know if I'm starting to get hyped for it or not. I feel a certain way about sci-fi RPGs. It's way easier for me to get into fantasy RPGs than sci-fi ones, but I feel like I'm starting to get a little hype for Starfield. The Elder Scrolls Online and Doom. QA workers included in the union are located in offices in Maryland and Texas, a CWA spokesperson said, probably here at Arcane. Today, we, a majority of QA workers at ZeniMax, are proud to announce the launch of our union with CWA Union. We are the first group of workers at Microsoft to formally unionize. We are empowered to advocate for ourselves and build a future where we can thrive alongside the company. That's actually a very interesting point that I hadn't thought about. Yeah, this would be Microsoft's first formal union. Man, Ninja did via the game industry. Who would have ever guessed? Of all industries that's got a ninja unionization into Microsoft, it was the game industry. You never know. You never know where it's going to come from. I mean, unionization in tech in general, it's not a thing, but it definitely needs to become more of a thing. Speaking of that, though, Polygon put together a pretty comprehensive list of all of the unionization efforts happening at game studios across the industry. Put it together in this nice little piece released a couple days ago. The game studios changing the industry by unionizing. Union interest is growing in the game industry. Well, let's go down the list then. The game industry is changing after years of groundwork over the past decade laid over social media and in the halls of gatherings like the Game Developers Conference. Workers are organizing into unions. You know what? There was actually an organization called Game Workers United. I haven't heard anything from those guys in the past few years. I don't know if they're involved with all this behind the scenes and they're just keeping a low profile or what. But they were making rounds in gaming media some years ago and then just disappeared. Yeah, their last tweet was June 21st of 2020, which was, please bear with us as we work to finalize the restructuring process at the international level and establish a new communications committee that will take over tweeting from this account. That was June 21st in 2020. And nothing since, so I don't know what happened to that communications committee or anything else. I've seen these guys, on a couple of outlets talking about unionization and whatnot, but not since this, though. Not since then. Yeah, they were also big advocates of police reform during all the George Floyd stuff. Statement by Organizational Transitional Period Committee of Game Workers United, adopted by vote of Assembly of all delegates. Okay, that was also in June of 2020. I don't know if these guys just fell off or what, but I would be very interested in knowing if they're still operating to any capacity. The last update on their blog was April 9th of 2021, almost 2 years ago. Industry change is following a nationwide trend in worker organization. Over the past few years, there's been an uptick in union elections and unfair labor complaints as workers vow to make change in their workplace. You can see this reflected in headlines too. Alongside union efforts at Activision Blizzard and Microsoft, campaigns are ongoing at major corporations like Apple, Google, and Starbucks. So it's coming into tech. It's coming into tech. We'll see if those efforts at Apple or Google succeed, but fascinating nonetheless. These are the gaming companies where workers are unionizing. We'll keep the list updated as more unions pop up across the board, starting with Activision Blizzard, which is really the most surprising one. Like, I would have never imagined there would be success at Activision Blizzard, but they were the most prominent one. Not the first, but the most prominent. Activision Blizzard made headlines in 2021 after California's Civil Rights Department, formerly called the Department of Fair Employment and Housing, sued the World of Warcraft and Call of Duty publisher over alleged widespread sexism and harassment. Activision Blizzard itself sued the CRD over the lawsuit in 2022. This kicked off a flurry of accusations and lawsuits, including a settled $18 million suit with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. Workers, too, took action. More than 1,000 workers walked out in July 2021, and since then, organizing efforts have continued. It's three unions, two officially recognized through the NLRB elections, are entirely made up of quality assurance workers. QA workers often feel they are overlooked, subjected to low pay, unstable contracts, and brutal overwork. All of that is very true. I can attest to that from firsthand experience. Activision Blizzard has repeatedly moved all stall union efforts. Why did I read it that wrong? Activision Blizzard has repeatedly moved to stall union efforts, maintaining the opinion that all workers at the respective studios should vote in union elections, not just QA workers. Yeah, because they know that they can fucking strong arm QA. That's like the one thing that they thrive on is strong arming their QA departments. So like, it's the whole like, oh, well, if we just let QA vote for their sake, then they're definitely going to vote to be treated better. Like, if we just let the slaves vote for fair treatment, then, they're going to vote for that. We should get the slave masters to vote as well. And then we should get the slave masters' friends. Bring those guys in. Let's see if they can vote also. And all those people, let's get the guys who run the ships back and forth between the Atlantic, in the Atlantic between Africa and America. Those guys, let's get them in on the vote. See how they going to vote for it. You pull all those efforts in, and that's not to equate engineers, developers, artists, and project managers, all of that, to literal fucking slavers. That's not the intention of that tortured analogy. But the idea is you take the people who are most likely to be amiable to your position, the most likely to be swayed by your position, and you dilute the vote. You dilute QA's efforts. They're the ones that are trying to drive this unionization effort, and they're trying to drive it, for their benefit, for their immediate benefit right now, recognizing that it can expand into the benefit for others, later. But rather than just having them vote for their insular effort, you just kind of flood their initiative with, all sorts of people who may or may not be amiable to being in a union themselves. But, that's just standard union busting practices. Multiple unfair labor complaints have been filed against the company alleging anti-union sentiment and union busting. As union efforts were underway at the company, Activision Blizzard converted all contract workers to full-time employees, a win workers attribute to organizing efforts. Yes, there were some stipulations with that though. I think they said something to the effect of like, oh no, what it was, I can't remember if it was Activision or if this was a different studio. Somebody had announced significant pay raises for all of its non-unionized employees, but unionized employees were not going to get pay raises, which is like, that's a little too on the nose about what they're trying to do there. Activision Blizzard expects to be acquired by Microsoft as part of a $68.7 billion deal. Jesus Christ, I hope that does not go through. The United States Federal Trade Commission is suing Microsoft in an effort to challenge the deal. After announcing the deal, Microsoft signed a neutrality agreement with the Communication Workers of America, promising not to interfere with union efforts at the company. Some consider the deal on Microsoft's part an attempt to ease the acquisition through the FTC, but regardless, it benefits the workers at Microsoft and potentially Activision Blizzard should go. It benefits the workers at Microsoft and potential Activision Blizzard should the deal go through, which is interesting because, as we just read, that Microsoft QA studio succeeded in forming its union, and Microsoft, for their part, has recognized its union and said that they are willing to enter good faith negotiations for a collective bargaining agreement. So that part of this component has been realized. Still, I hope that purchase, that acquisition of Activision Blizzard Microsoft doesn't go through. I still think that would be a disaster for the industry to just further consolidate, but we'll see how that develops. It would be interesting though. It would certainly be interesting because then that would make it all the more likely, I think, that the unionization efforts at Activision Blizzard come to a successful conclusion. Microsoft and CWA reiterated their cooperation in an ad running in the Washington Post. The Verge reported in January, should the Activision Blizzard deal go through, Microsoft vows to bring its neutrality agreement and principles to the company. The Washington Post ad also appealed to the FTC to approve the deal. Damn, they're thirsty. They're fucking thirsty as fuck. Posting ads begging the FTC to let it happen. Man, they are just on their knees, just begging, with using that pleading eye emoji. In iOS, the pleading eye emoji with the big puppy dog eyes. They basically just posted an ad in the Washington Post of just that emoji with please underneath it. As we enter a new year, we remain committed to creating the best workplaces we can for people who make a living in the tech sector, Microsoft and the CWA said in the ad. When both labor and management bring their voices to the bargaining table, employees, shareholders, and customers alike benefit. All right. Blizzard Albany, formerly known as Vicarious Visions, is working on a Blizzard Entertainment's Diablo franchise, including upcoming Diablo 4. It was the second studio within Activision Blizzard to successfully unionize. QA workers there won their vote 14-0 in December 2022, following a number of alleged union-busting efforts, according to the CWA. The next step for the group is to enter contract negotiations with Activision Blizzard. So there are at least some components of Activision Blizzard that are unionized and beginning to engage with negotiations with Activision Blizzard. So that's interesting. Raven Software is the first studio within Activision Blizzard to unionize. An effort kicked off in December 2021 as Call of Duty Warzone QA workers walked out of work to protest what they consider unfair layoffs of contract workers. QA workers announced their union push in January 2022 and were met with resistance from Activision Blizzard management. Activision Blizzard management attempted to restructure the company and ruled that QA bargaining unit ineligible to vote. A judge ruled in favor of the QA union after the hearings, and Raven Software workers called Game Workers Alliance. Oh, that's where those guys are. I was just looking those bitches up. So they called them. So is that what happened? Or did they just co-opt their name? A judge ruled in favor of the QA union after hearings, and Raven Software workers called Game Workers Alliance. I mean, that was the name of the other thing. I wonder if it's one and the same, or if it's one and the same, or if they just co-opted the name. Let me. Oh, this is Game Workers Unite. Okay. Game Workers Alliance is something different then. Still wondering what happened to Game Workers Unite. Who is involved in that? Maybe McKenna is an American labor organizer and the senior campaign lead for Code CWA, Communication Workers Organizer. Okay, so she is working with the CWA. So while working as a QA tester, okay, she was a tester, co-founder Gamers United. She was hired by CWA Union in 2020 to lead their initiative. Okay, that's what happened. So the founder of Game Workers United was poached by CWA. So she's been the one that's been barnstorming across the industry, getting these unionization efforts across the finish line. As of August 2022, the Code CWA campaign has organized over 3,000 union members in various sub-industries of the tech sector across 25 bargaining units in the last 2 years of organizing. Damn, okay, so she didn't disappear. She just got absorbed into CWA and has been successfully running her campaign from there. Awesome. Good to hear. Good to know. Good to know. Good to know. Proletariat, what an appropriate name. Boston-based studio Proletariat announced the filing of its union petition in late December 2022. The Spellbreak developer was acquired by Activision Blizzard. So much Activision Blizzard. Is this all sub? Yeah, this is all sub. These are all underneath, all under the purview of Activision, I suppose. Spellbreak was shut down, and now the team is working on World of Warcraft. An election has not yet been scheduled by the NLRB. Like the other unionized studios at Activision Blizzard, Proletariat is represented by the CWA. Proletariat's proposed unit includes all positions outside of management, around 60 workers currently. Wow, so that's beyond QA then, huh? Interesting. This might actually be the first one. All of these others were QA. Yeah, this one is QA. Blizzard Albany is QA, 14 QA workers. Ravensoft, it's QA workers. So this is the first one that doesn't specifically say QA. So all positions outside of management makes me think that they've got artists and engineers wrapped up in there too. That's not insignificant. Anemone Hug? I don't even know if I said that right. Haven't heard of these dudes. Union footholds in the game industry is not limited to the United States. Studios in Canada are also making strides to organize their workplace. Developer Anemone Hug Interactive, which supported Hardspace Shipbreaker and is currently working on an original game, voted in favor of unionization in 2022. Anemone Hug's union is part of the Canadian Animation Guild. Oh, okay, cool. So this is not CWA. This is Canadian Animation Guild, the International Alliance of Theatrical Stage Employees, Local 938. IATSE largely services entertainment workers. Oh, okay, yeah. IATSE. IATSE largely services entertainment workers internationally, while the British Columbian Animation Unit focuses on local animation workers and now game developers. Okay, so that's really cool. So then those guys, sounds like those guys catch more than just QA as well. Cards Against Humanity. Cards Against Humanity workers who make card games of the same name, unionized in 2020 with Chicago and Midwest Regional Joint Board of Workers United following a report that alleged racism and sexist culture at the company. Why does that not surprise me? Like, it almost seems appropriate that Cards Against Humanity would have a culture of racism and sexism if you ever played Cards Against Humanity. Cards Against Humanity management recognized the unit, and the group successfully completed contract negotiations to secure better benefits, including a successorship clause that could be enacted if owners sold the company. Workers at Cards Against Humanity were likely the first in their industry to unionize. So that's kind of like the tabletop industry then. Keyword Studios. Contract QA workers who support BioWare's Dragon Age Dreadwolf at Keyword Studios in Edmonton at Keyword Studios Edmonton location voted to unionize in June 2022. Side note, I actually am looking forward to this one. I hope it doesn't suck. I was let down by Dragon Age Inquisition. Even though Dragon Age, I think, has more games that I'm disappointed in than games that I like, because I have such a soft spot for that first Dragon Age, I still revere the franchise positively. I view it positively still. So I am looking forward to Dreadwolf. I just hope it's better than Inquisition. And Inquisition wasn't all bad. It felt... Inquisition felt... It didn't feel like it was a fully realized game to me. It was almost like it was a series of demos of systems that would be used in other types of games that they just kind of taped together. You would get to so you had the war table, which was kind of a weird setup for venturing out into the broader world. It wasn't open world, which is fine. I mean, even though everyone's pretty used to open world games now, back when it came out, open world games, you had Skyrim, I think, and I think this game, I think Inquisition came out before Witcher 3 Wild Hunt. So massive open world RPGs weren't quite the norm. Dragon Age 1 certainly wasn't open world, but the way that you travel from place to place didn't feel as convoluted as it does in Inquisition, like having to go to the church and go to the war table, and then from there you would go to your different regions. But then once you got to a region, the map felt small. It didn't really feel big and open. It didn't feel big, but then it didn't feel open because you were too constricted on where you can travel. Like, you couldn't run up most types of hills. You were blocked from rocks and shit. There was no jumping or climbing mechanic involved in any of it. You would just run around like these very restrictive sort of areas. And then when you get dumped into this area, it was just a metric fuck ton of waypoints and little glowing things here and glowing things there. You had to close portals here, collect a bunch of shit here. And it was never really presented to you in a linear way. They just it was they had a toy box full of toys and they just scattered it all over the place. And it was go ahead, do whatever you want here. Once you accomplish a certain percentage of all the shit that we dumped out into this map, then you can proceed with the story. And they just repeated that for several different environments. It never felt fully realized. It just seemed almost like a rushed game. So I hope Dreadwolf is much better. I'm looking forward to it still. Like a Moaning Hug. Keyboard Studio is a Canadian studio. Their election went through the Alberta Labor Relations Board, where the group is organized under the United Food and Commercial Workers Canada Union, Local 401. United Food. Interesting. KWS Edmonton United. The union began organizing after management implemented a return to office order that workers didn't agree with. Commuting costs too much given their low salaries, and the studio doesn't offer paid time off when sick, they said. Well, this is why you have a union. Get yourself some PTO and get yourself a bump up in salary. Either a bump up in salary or you're allowed to work from home. Should be both, in my opinion, but at least one or the other. And definitely PTO. Or paid sick leave, at least. Microsoft, we talked about Microsoft a bit. Microsoft's labor neutrality agreement with the CWA went into effect in June 2022 when it promised not to interfere with the union organizing at the company, including at Activision Blizzard, should the acquisition go through. This isn't a common approach, according to labor experts, and may have been influenced by the acquisition itself, which is under scrutiny by the FTC. Regardless, the deal benefits workers who want to organize with the CWA. We saw it in practice firsthand when QA workers at several ZeniMax studios announced their desire to unionize, and again, the article we just read, that unionization efforts went through. As it is stated here, ZeniMax, roughly 300 QA workers at ZeniMax Media have unionized under the CWA. The group, called ZeniMax Workers United, sidestepped the NLRB election due to Microsoft's neutrality deal. Instead, workers voted through unionization cards or an online portal to prove interest in the company. A supermajority of those 300 workers voted yes, and Microsoft recognized the union. It was a much speedier process than the traditional pathway, as evidenced by efforts at Activision Blizzard, ZeniMax Workers United, includes workers at Bethesda Game Studios, id Software, and ZeniMax Online in Maryland and Texas offices. The next step for ZeniMax is to nominate a bargaining committee and move into contract negotiations. Paizo. United Paizo Workers formed in 2021, making it one of the earlier unions in the industry. Paizo is one of the biggest tabletop role-playing game publishers. It is responsible for both Pathfinder and Starfinder. Oh, cool. I never played Pathfinder, but I've always been interested. Workers at the studio accused the Washington state-based company of pay inequity, harassment, and managerial impropriety. The fuck does that mean? Managerial impropriety? Paizo voluntarily recognized the union, and collective bargaining began shortly after. UPW reached a tentative agreement with Paizo management on certain topics in early December 22, including benefits, remote work, time off, and work hours. Bargaining will continue until both sides agree to all terms. Awesome. Congratulations to them. Tender Clause. Indie studio Tender Clause, based in Los Angeles, announced its union petition in July 2022. The entire proposed unit supported the effort. The group is called Tender Clause Human Union, a nod to its game virtual reality, which includes an in-game union for humans that work for AI. Oh god, that's dystopian. Tender Clause management recognized the union with the representation of CWA. Contract bargaining began in November and is ongoing. And sadly, I made a video over these dudes when it happened too. Video games now defunct. Bummer. Video game's debut and only title is Beastbreaker, a turn-based game mixed with a bit of Peggle. The video game studio is now defunct, shut down in 2022 due to a lack of funds. But the impact its workers made in the video game industry is still important. Video Workers United, represented by the CWA, was the first video game industry in It's the first video game union in North America. And update the story has been included to Microsoft information. Okay, so those are all the unionization efforts that are either in the process or has come to a successful conclusion in the game industry. Making waves. Hopefully, we'll see the success spread to Apple and Google and Starbucks. Starbucks has had some successes too. Hey everybody, thanks for watching the video. If you liked what you just saw, hit the like. If you want to see more, hit subscribe. I'd appreciate it if you did both. They would be very good for the channel and help me build the community here. If you have any kind of comments or opinions or anything like that, by all means drop them in the comment section below. I like engaging with y'all, want to do more of that, so thank you again and see you next time.